Welcome back, everyone. Are you ready for some goals action? Woo! Very good, very good. I have 3 envelopes here with the new goals. But before we get to those, we will wrap up the last goals because a lot of exciting things happened for the last 3 goals. And the champions will talk a bit about what happened and what we achieved. And we will start with call and accessibility.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, what? It's the thing is what? Maybe I will just click here. Yeah. Okay. Hello everyone. I will present what we did for the last 2 years for the KDE for all goals as well accessibility goal. But first of all, why accessibility? Where are we working on that? Well, first of all, it's inclusive and give equal access to everyone. Like a lot of us are not impacted by accessibility issues. But we even know even if you're getting older or friends of us, I mean, like there's huge proportion of the population, world population, which might have some vision issues, might not be able to use a mouse correctly. There's a lot of reasons where you cannot use your computer as a normal user. Um, it also improves usability because even like if you are not impacted by these sort of issues, just having like keyboard navigation in your applications improves the usability of your applications. Having good contrast for UI elements helps everyone. Um, yeah, it's the right thing to do. Like you want to integrate, you want to make sure that everyone is able to be part of the society, be able to interact with computers because computers are so much important nowadays. Like if you want to order something, you need to use a computer. If you want to do like administrative stuff for your government, you often also need a computer. Yeah. And if that isn't enough to work on accessibility, there's also like it's a law. Like Europe, US, a lot of countries, and also at least in Europe, in North America, and as a lot of other places, they are gradually requiring for public usage, but also for private companies to use only software which is accessible. So if we want to reach like public institutions, we need accessibility. Yeah. Right. Right. And like, did we manage to make KDE accessible? I don't think so, because it's not something that you can do in 2 years. It's long process and it takes time. It takes time, it takes development effort, and yeah. But we did manage to do a lot of things still. Yeah, also like we had a lot of accessibility improvements in in Plasma, in the applications, in KDE frameworks, and even in Qt. Um, and I mean, like for example, in Plasma, the range of accessibility improvements it's from keyboard navigation, um, color blindness corrections in Plasma, um, screen reader support. It's not like one each thing that we did. Like it's a wide range of issues which we solved. Yeah, and I mean, and we also did like a improvement in frameworks and Qt like helps everyone. Like if each time we fix an issue in Kirigami or in widget add-ons or in Qt, it makes it easier for other people to build accessible applications. Sure, they can also mess up in their own application accessibility, but trying to make like default widgets accessible is super important. Yeah, I mean, this is like a screenshot of accessibility text merge request for the Plasma group, only for the Plasma group. And you can see there was like more than 200 merge requests, and from them there was like almost 200 merged. There's still a bit open and a few like which were marked as invalid. Yeah, and aside of improving the accessibility of our applications, we also did a lot of work inside the tooling. For example, there's a new applications accessibility inspector, which allows you to look at your applications and look at the accessibility tree, look at the state of the accessibility there. The application was actually quite older, but it was never released. It was super hidden inside the build folder. And yeah, now it's a proper applications which is released and a lot of improvement, thanks also to Laurent and others. Yeah. But there's also like more improvements to the tooling. There's a Selenium driver. It allows you to write integration testing based on the accessibility API. So each time you want to write integration tests, because you should write tests in your applications, you also make sure that your applications is accessible, because if it's not accessible, you cannot test it. So you are forced to make it accessible. And that helped a lot. And also not only for my goal, but also for other goals, which we'll probably talk later. And yeah, it's provided by the IT SPI dbus API. And this was all done by Harald, mostly. Super good work. Yeah. We also did some improvement to the documentations, because without documentations, you need to learn everything again. So we had like no documentation about how to write tests for Selenium. We also had a goal sprint in April this year in Berlin, where we tried to combine every goals together in a room. It was super productive. And I mean, like every sprint, it's super productive, but we managed to fix a lot of bugs in Kirigami add-ons, some applications. So yeah. Yeah. But I mean, there's still like a lot of future work to do. Like I said earlier, we are not accessible yet. We have still like a lot of things to do to improve situations. For example, text to speech. Like there's a new frameworks to do that, based on dbus, which is compatible with Flatpak and Snap, which we need to implement in Qt. Because there's a area abstraction in Qt, and we need to implement that. It's like a lot of work. There is some work going on about a replacement API for ITSPI. So it's still like really, really work in progress phase, but we need to get involved there and try to make sure that it's good for us. And yeah, there's also like in many applications, as even in Plasma, there's still like a lot of work to be done to fix remaining issues. And yeah. Yeah. So a few lessons learned as a goalkeeper. It's not because there's a goal who was voted by the committee, but you will certainly find yourself with a lot of contributor to that goal. Um, that's I mean, it's like we are a community. If we don't have managers. We don't have people who tell us to work on this thing and this thing. And I think it's a good thing, like to be able to have some freedom on what we want to work on. And a lot of people are already like overloaded by their own projects and tasks. So it's always a bit difficult to find contributors to work on some topics. And I think like as a goalkeeper, probably we should try to do a lot more outreach to the developers and the community to make sure that people are aware about the goals and in, recommend them to invest a bit of time there and tell them what the advantage for them is. Like, for example, having like iteration tests is super important. Like, it's something like it's a bit of work at the beginning. You need to fix your accessibility, you need to write the test, but at the end, it's super rewarding because when you have less bugs. Don't fix all of the bugs, but you have less regressions. So you need to do like a more outreach there. Yeah. Yeah. And for the last slides, I want to thanks like everyone who worked on accessibility. Uh, there's a few names there, but there's actually like a lot more people who did work there, and it's super. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Next one, Nate, for the automation goal.
Thanks, Carl. Let's see. First of all, $1 million question. So here's the best accessibility improvement we got. Not done yet. Still going. Okay, I'm done now. So now I'd like to talk about my goal, automation and systematization. This is definitely the easiest to pronounce goal out there. So that definitely makes it the most important one forever. The important thing of this goal was to enable all of us to be lazier, because that's the point of automation and systematization. All of us are overloaded all the time. I think everybody in this room has the experience of having 10 times more things to do than you have time to do them. And one thing that's often the case for people like us who are highly productive is that we find ourselves saddled with grunt work. We have terminal commands to run. We have email responses to craft that we've already sent 10 times before, all sorts of things that we're experts at doing, but that take up time. And when you have tasks like that you repeat over and over again, it consumes a significant amount of your own time and resources and life's energy. And so the idea here was that we should all focus on automating away these kinds of tasks that we don't actually really want to do and that we're very good at. And when we do that, we get a whole lot more time left that we can actually put into doing the things that we want to be spending our time on, the things that give us joy and make us happy and push forward the state of the art. When we look at this, the goal was essentially animated by 3 principles behind that. The first one is that automation beats manual labor. Manual labor is error prone, it's time consuming, it's boring, it's not fun. We've all had this experience of doing something that we've done a million times before, and it's just not a good use of your time. So for all of those things, it's good to automate away all of those tasks. The other one is that policies are better than opinions. It's another thing that I think we've all had the experience of, is that you propose a change, you say, let's do this. You open up a merge request and you get a comment that says, +1, I like it. And then somebody else says, -1, I don't like it. And now what? What do you do? If you don't have a policy to guide what goes next, oftentimes this just gets stuck forever. And so the idea here is that if we can all get together and we can agree on certain methods of doing things, on certain policies behind decision making, that it can cut down on the number of +1 I like it, -1 I don't like it, that is just not terribly productive. And so there was a focus on making decision making systematic in this way that's sort of not technical, it's more social. But that was another thing that we wanted to focus on for this goal. And the third idea behind this was that it's better to work on a team than to work alone, because working alone is very lonely, and it can be hard to find other people who want to help you. You get depressed and disappointed when you burn out and need to take a break. Nobody takes over the work for you. So it's much better if we can work as teams and we can communicate as teams, rather than just doing everything privately all alone, because it's sad and makes us unhappy. Uh, there's sort of the why bother question about all of this, which is the elephant in the room. So if all of us are just here working on KDE forever, we've certainly got infinite time, right? Well, the fact of the matter is that KDE is a multi-generational institution. All of us are here today. We were not here yesterday, and we may not be here tomorrow. Metaphorically speaking, of course. Hopefully, we actually were here yesterday and we'll be here tomorrow, but hopefully you know what I mean. Uh, the fact of the matter is that people come and go, and that is totally okay. It's in fact amazing. It's one of the things that makes KDE so incredible, is that we've managed to keep up the interest and enthusiasm for the overall project over almost 3 decades. But this necessarily means that there's a lot of turnover. And that means that people, when they leave, take their knowledge and their labor with them. If you look at this graph here, this is something that Carl has put together recently. Thank you, Carl. The colors are essentially individual years worth of contributors. And if you look at that big blob of orange people, those orange people kind of fell off over time. And everything those orange people knew was lost if they didn't embed that knowledge in code, in automation, and in documentation. So that by the time those red and blue people showed up, they didn't know the things that the orange people knew if it wasn't documented and preserved in processes properly. And so I think this kind of a graph is really important for all of us to consider in terms of our legacies in KDE. You know, whichever color we represent on this graph, if we want everything that we produced to continue and be used and built upon by the next generation, we have to make active efforts to make sure that happens. And that's basically what this goal was all about. We've already touched a little bit on some of the benefits. Let's briefly go over that again. Probably the biggest one is quality, because when you do things according to processes and automation and tooling, you end up with a better result, because it's not kind of random and dictated by who had time or who had skills or which person happened to be doing it at this particular moment in time. And the other thing you get out of this is consistency, because when something gets done the same way, or at least according to the same process every single time, then you get a repeatable result. And repeatability of results is really important, because it's something that increases the perception of stability in your software, and it makes it possible for normal people who don't have the incredible pattern recognition skills of engineers like us to use something just because it behaves the same way every single time. And that's important for us to have in our software and in our internal processes too. And the other thing, of course, it gives us is free time, because who wants to do crap that's boring, right? We all want to be writing new features. We want to be improving the user interface. We want to do things that are enjoyable. We don't want to be fixing the same bug 10 times over again because it keeps regressing and nobody noticed. Maybe 10 is an exaggeration, but I can think of specific bugs that have regressed 3 times in memory, and even that's too much. So let's not do that, right? When we do this, we'll have less grunt work to do, fewer regressions, and I think I mentioned earlier arguments and merge requests. Another thing is style nitpicks, which is in some cases more frustrating than arguments and merge request. When you submit a big block of code and you get people saying, well, please put a semicolon at the end of this line of JavaScript, and don't put a semicolon at the end of this line of JavaScript. And, you know, we have tools that can format these things automatically, right? This is a waste of our life, having these arguments, like pick something and then move on. So there was an effort to do those sorts of things. When we look at what the goal was actually focused on in terms of actions, We did a lot of automated testing. Carl mentioned ATSPI and Selenium, which was incredible work and something that really synergized very well across the goals. Harold, as mentioned earlier, was really instrumental in bringing this technology to the forefront, and it allowed us to improve our code coverage and testing as well as accessibility at the same time. So, especially in Plasma, we saw really enthusiastic adoption of this technology, and now we have a huge number of user interface tests that seem kind of silly and dumb, but push the button and make sure the thing happens when you push the button. Turns out that's really important. So we have a lot of that now, and that's really great. Another aspect of the work was automatic bug triage. Bug triage is something that I think everybody in this room hates, myself included. I do a lot of it. You might be forgiven for thinking that I enjoy it. I don't. Nobody likes it. So let's do less of it, not because we're ignoring it, but because we have machines to do it for us, right? So we have this thing called the Bugzilla bot, and it will apply certain canned answers to common issues that people have in bug reports, and it will prompt people to improve their bug reports, automatically close old ones that were submitted for versions not in support anymore. This is something that there's a huge amount of low-hanging fruit on, but there was significant progress anyway, and that made a big difference. And finally, what we also have is the subject of documentation. Documentation is in some aspects the weakest focus here because it requires active maintenance. Documentation gets stale and goes out of date very quickly, but it's nonetheless really important that we make an effort to keep it up to date, because documentation that's out of date is in many ways worse than no documentation at all, because it can send people down the wrong path and making wrong decisions. If we look at what succeeded in this, first, let's look at this fun graph. In terms of bug triage, if you look at this, the red line are the number of unconfirmed bugs in Plasma Shell over time. And you can see that that drops precipitously and then keeps falling for a while. Now, I mentioned automatic bug triage. I'm not going to say that the Bugzilla bot produced this, but the Bugzilla bot made it easier for bug triagers to focus on the bug reports that actually mattered. So they didn't spend all of their time saying, I'm sorry, Plasma 5.12 is out of date. Can you please try using a better distro? That's just not something we have to do anymore because a machine does that for us. We have machines to bash distros now, which is a major improvement. We've got all sorts of other stuff too. We made it mandatory for a lot of projects to pass their tests. We had tests. Some were disabled, some were perpetually broken. There was a major focus on making sure that tests actually do what they're supposed to be doing. We have continuous integration jobs to build Flatpaks and Windows binaries, so we can just spit those out on command. That's super cool. No more manual labor there. Like I talked about, we did Bugzilla bot stuff. There was a lot of documentation updates. Some of this was driven by Tiago, KDE documentation contractor, but a lot of it was volunteer driven as well, which was fantastic. And on the subject of documentation, we got a whole new set of human interface guidelines, which was rewritten from scratch to actually be applicable to the way KDE designs and builds software today. And we've already seen some great results from that in the form of people submitting changes to bring applications in conformance with the human interface guidelines, which kind of goes to the point about when you have processes that work, people follow the processes, right? Nonetheless, we saw some challenges with this goal. Probably the biggest one was that nothing encompassed under this goal is ever truly urgent. We all have our daily fires to put out. All this stuff is always back burner stuff. It can be tempting to push it off until later and say, well, we'll ship it in a state that's good enough now, and then we'll care about that stuff later. And I don't think there's a silver bullet for this, but it really requires vigilance to make sure that we're improving the processes and the quality at the same time that we're shipping the software. Another major challenge for us was that even with ATSPI and Selenium, writing tests is still just really hard. It's probably harder than it should be, and it makes it more difficult for people to just kind of throw in new auto tests whenever they add a new feature or change the user interface or something. I think there's some friction there that can still be lessened a little bit. And then also, let's face it, it's kind of boring. This everything about this goal was the opposite of flashy and exciting. And so ensuring that there was motivation to actually do the work has been quite a challenge over time. This is not an indictment of anybody in the room. If anything, frankly, it's an indictment of me, the gold champion, which gets to the final point. I probably did not lead this goal in as active a way as I think in retrospect I would have liked to, and that I think ended up being a challenge for the goal itself. And that leads me to some lessons learned that I can share as a goal champion. I've now been a goal champion for 2 goals. I did usability and productivity a few years ago, and then I sat it out for the cycle after that, and then I did automation and systematization. And one thing that I really feel like I can say as a goal champion is that being proactive and leading by example is super important. It's very easy to make fancy presentations, but nothing spurs on work like work. And so if you're the goal champion, it's very important that you be seen doing the work and that you then communicate that work. I'm going to skip something here, but on the subject of communication, another thing that I found in this particular goal cycle was that episodic communication in the form of fewer updates about larger, more impactful wins seemed to be more motivating than a steady stream of small things. It seemed like that it was easy for people to kind of tune out a stream of small wins, whereas whenever there was something really big that got announced, that would generate quite a bit of attention. So I would say for our future goal champions, try to focus on the big wins. You know, that's more motivating. And the final thing here is that it's just really difficult to change things, it's especially when the status quo is good enough. We have incredible engineering talent in KDE, and so people are already largely accustomed to doing things like writing auto tests, keeping up documentation, following good practices in their commit messages, being collegial. And so our status quo is already pretty darn good. It's, I would say, in many ways, much better than what you see in a lot of private companies out there. And so when the status quo is already good, it can be challenging to keep up the motivation to improve it even further. And that's something that I think we can all have a thought about, you know, how we can take a lot of this stuff to the next level. Oop, doot, doot. And yep, that's the end. Thank you, everybody, for your support in this goal and for supporting me and doing all this work. It was fantastic to be your goal champion. I'm going to hand it off to Cornelius now. Here we go.
Thank you. Let's move the mouse pointer out of the way. So yeah, I will present you what we achieved with the sustainable software goal. That's the third goal in the row. And what I will present is mostly what we did in the 2 years, but also a little bit what happened before and what will happen after. So you already heard it in our keynote this morning. We have a problem. The way we are living is not sustainable, and we are contributing to it, but we are also able to do something about it. So I won't go into the details why it's important, but I think we all agree that it is important to do something. And software plays a role in that. KDE as a project, KDE as in what we produce in terms of software products, this has an impact. Software has an impact on how IT is used, how computers are used, how all the devices are used, and we can do something there by focusing on doing that in a more sustainable way. And that was what this was about KDE delivering sustainable software. And when we started with the goal, we basically approached 3 perspectives. So the first one is to do alignment of what already was happening in the community, also aligning with others, more like sorting out what is important there and trying to put it together in a meaningful form. The second area, visibility, quite important because a lot of what we did there was not about introducing new things, but making visible what already happens in free software and KDE specifically. There's a lot which is already paying into this goal of doing sustainable software, so making this more visible also to the outside. That was the second part. And the third part, then concrete initiatives where we did projects to improve things in a lot of different areas. Yeah, and what we did there, I will now show you in detail. First, the alignment area. So you already saw the picture from the joint goal sprint. That really was nice that we got together there. There actually was quite a bit of crossover between the goals. So all the Selenium work is really important to also automate tests to measure energy efficiency. We will come to that in a second. So getting together there really was a nice thing to bring people together and to work together on the goal topics. And what we also saw is that basically the alignment, as I said, we had a few individual initiatives where we put things together, and it all, I think, culminated in the KDE eco community becoming a thing. So now we are really collecting things under this. We have regular meetups, we have a website, and we have discussion forums and so on. And I think we are developing this common understanding that this is the umbrella where we can really bring these topics together. So a lot of that is actually happening there. I will talk about the individual points in detail when we come to the initiatives. And you will all find that on the website. And that actually was also a result of the sprint we did there. We did some brainstorming there. You see some sketches there. So this was a really nice initiative to be together there in person, to be able to sketch things on whiteboards and so on. And we came up with a structure, how we actually want to collect things and present things. And this is now actually live on the website, reflected there. So addressing the three areas of users who take benefit from using sustainable software, then advocates who want to help others to understand what the issues are and do something about it, and then the developers, so a lot of people here in this room who are working on the software which is used by these groups. And this all fits really nicely together with KDE's overall vision. So what we really saw with the sustainable software goal and the values which are behind that aligns with KDE's mission. This is about control for everybody with the digital devices, with the software, that they are in control of not contributing to this burning planet we saw before. So this aligns very well. And now we come to the second area of visibility. So we also already saw that in the keynote, and this actually happened before we started the sustainable software goal. We got the Blue Angel for Ocular. And this really was, I think, you can ask a question how useful it is to have a label for a piece of software when nobody else has adopted the label yet. But I think it sends a quite important message. It sends the message that it is possible to do this sustainable software. The criteria of the blue label make a lot of sense in terms of resource efficiency, energy efficiency, also in preventing hardware to become obsolete, and also to give people autonomy about how they use their software. So this is reflected there. We proved that it's possible to do with our software, with free software, and this gave us attention. So you see the award ceremony where we got the official paper document with the Blue Angel on it. And this also led to quite some other things which were only possible because we did that. So one thing we did over the last year or so was we were being involved in revising the Blue Angel. There was an initiative by the Umweltbundesamt, the German Federal Environmental Agency, who was doing the label. And they were extending the scope, revising it, and they asked for feedback. We were involved with a couple of workshops. We participated, could contribute our experience with actually fulfilling the criteria. And the result of that is a now extended set of criteria, which not only covers desktop software, but also servers and server software and mobile software. And for Ocular, that we checked that, it basically means we will continue, and it will continue to have the Blue Angel label. So we can work with this in promotion and everything else to continue. One open question is, do we want to certify more applications? So we have an answer. Perfect. So it's possible. We have set up a framework to do that. It actually has become easier with the revised criteria because the measurement process is more flexible. It's more about documenting than about following a certain procedure. And we can help you with that. So if you're interested in your application being certified with the Blue Angel, talk to me, talk to the eco community. We are well prepared for that. And a few things happened also as a result of that. So this is one opportunity where we got invited as an expert to a conference in the German parliament about design and sustainability issues. And because we were present on the landscape with the Blue Angel, so we could talk there. It was actually a quite interesting event. Talking to the people who actually are quite in line with what we are thinking. So I was surprised how much alignment there is actually to people outside of our community. We usually don't really see that much because we are staying in our respective bubbles. So it was really nice to get this outreach and meet other people there. And another thing which also was indirectly triggered by the Blue Angel was this article in the second biggest German newspaper, where they had a actually pretty nice article about how programming is possible in an environmental friendly way. So they reported about what we did with the Blue Angel, what this means for society and for sustainability, and gave us a really nice audience there. And that was not the only thing where we actually got press attention by what we are doing there, which again I think is a nice effect of doing these things, which visibility and outreach. And we also gave a lot of presentations. Joseph was very busy with that on many conferences. I also gave one of the more impactful conferences was the Bits and Bäume, so Bits and Trees. That's a crossover of technology conference and other sustainability groups. And I was talking there in detail about what we did to get the Blue Angel. So if you're interested in that, you can watch the presentation. There's a recording. And again, I think that was really nice because we saw that our vision, how we see KDE, our values align with many other people's and many other people's values. And there's a bigger crowd there than just us who is following the same goals. So that was a nice effect of this goal to see that we are not alone. And this continues. So some of the events we are present now in many areas. Here's one example of a Bring It Back to Life event going about installing software on old hardware. We'll talk about that a little bit more. We have a list of actually events and presentation. If you follow the URL there, where you can reach out to the people who did that, and also see the presentations and many more things there. And a different form of visibility, I said, KDE already is doing a lot of sustainable software. We already did that before, but often it's not very visible. People don't recognize that. So one way we approached that was to add on the Ocular website a nice new tab, which actually shows all this information, make people understand why it's important and how free software does that, and Ocular specifically. So addressing all the different areas we are addressing in our software, which are also covered by the Blue Angel. So, some more initiatives we did where we worked on specific things. So, one thing which I think helped us quite a bit in working on the sustainable software goal was that we already had a funded project funded by the German Umweltbundesamt to work on Blue Angel for free software. That was the name of the project. So there we helped. The idea was to put together information how you can actually get the Blue Angel and how you can fulfill the criteria, even if you're not going to the certification, that you actually have help with doing the measurements and what is involved in there. So this is actually the resource, the handbook, which got out of that. That's, if you want to get the Blue Angel, start reading there. It already contains a lot of information. Probably needs an update now after the criteria got revised, but that's certainly still a very helpful resource. And this project got us the funding to have people have some time to get the community going, to get projects going. So this was really helpful. And there's another project, and this already was mentioned in the keynote this morning as well, the OptGreen project, to help people to use free software as sustainable software on older hardware, so that hardware doesn't have to go to waste. And this is now ongoing. Again, I think having the goal helped us to get the project, but also helps us to keep the activities in the goal moving. So this is really at the moment current, so have a look there. There are things where you can help. And one thing I like about this project, that it's again about reaching out to an extended audience, reaching out beyond the technical people who are programming KDE, but us going to people who align with our values, who also think about sustainability maybe from a different perspective, and see where are the synergies, where can we get together, how can we help them to get over the technical obstacles, but also learn from them how to address things in a broader scope. Another initiative which also was ongoing before we started with the goal, which was necessary to get the Blue Angel certification, is KDE Ecolab. So this is a measurement lab where we measure energy efficiency and resource efficiency. We have set up a small system there where it's possible to follow the procedure, which is defined by the original Blue Angel criteria. There was a lot of activity on this, making this more accessible so that you could also do remote measurements, also the tooling, using the automation which is necessary to do these measurements. There we also looked into this Selenium-based automation and different things. So this lab is available, and it's still it's continuing, and we want to expand that. Also, I think this is now one lab. The setup is not very complicated. It's not very expensive. So you could set up a similar lab anywhere else if you're interested to do your own measurements. If you have an old computer somewhere, the only thing you need is a measurement device and some software to actually run it. And a lot of things which helped with KDE Ecolab, but also beyond that, happened in the season of KDE and some of code initiatives. So we had quite a number of projects there looking into energy consumption and different other aspects, helping with the Ecolab. So if you are interested in these are actually clickable links. If you download the slides after the talk, you can look them up. Yeah, and thanks to all the people there who helped with mentoring that, but also, of course, who are doing the projects. I think this really is a very nice way how to keep people coming to KDE, helping them to grow and get really, really good results from that. So, yeah, and in this sense, I mentioned it before, but to make it a little bit more specifically, especially with KDE Ecolab, we had a lot of help from people who already worked on measuring energy in different ways. So the Umweltcampus Birkenfeld, that was the group of scientists who were working, who have actually created the first Blue Angel criteria and the measurement procedures there. So they also helped us a lot. We were in good contact. But also other groups we met through this goal and what we did there, like Recoding Berlin. I think they renamed themselves, but these are great guys who also help. Who have a similar direction in what they are doing, and that's, I think, also quite helpful to get together. So. That we can actually see how others approach that, and we can just broaden our activities there, because we are a limited number of people, and I think we can need all the help we get. So doing things together always is a good idea. So maybe a few words about what didn't work, what did we learn? So, of course, there were a lot of ideas when we started the goal, but not everything came to life. So one thing we sketched out at the beginning was that it would be nice to make it more transparent in KDE, where we already have documents explaining sustainability aspects, where we have energy management, measurements and stuff like that. So the idea was to have something similar to the translation dashboard, where you can see, okay, how different applications are there. So this didn't happen. We did, I think, that's basically all what happened there. We have a sketch. I think the idea is still a nice one. Maybe something happens there, but that's where we, I think, didn't manage to engage the rest of the community in a way that that there would be any visible progress. So I think that's one of the challenges there. Another thing we wanted to do, where we did a few steps with KDE Goals, but we are not done yet, was to make adding to performance and other measurements, but really energy efficiency measurements, adding that to our CI, so that we could have something like a sustainability gate in our release process, making sure that applications are not consuming twice as much energy as before without us knowing. So having these tests integrated in the CI, that was one of the original visions very long ago, but we are not there yet. Again, that is something, of course, which affects much more people and which also needs more support from the community. So would be nice to continue to work on that. But in general, I think one thing I perceived as something where we weren't successful, although we achieved a lot, is that we achieved that as this KDE Eco team, and that was a really good group, and it was nice to get new people in there as well. But the engagement, and Carl also mentioned that with the rest of the community, we didn't manage to get many people involved there. So that was, I think, I don't know. My feeling is that we have a lot of sub-communities in KDE which work really nicely together and have great results, create great applications and so on. But these overreaching goals, these things which we really need people to come together. I mean, we are here, that's a great thing, but we are a very distributed community, and how can we act more as one community? I think we have a little bit separated there in a group of more decentralized communities. Maybe we can really find ways how to get together with these goals like sustainability or the upcoming goals. I'm really curious to see what they are, but get people together. So I can only encourage you to look into what is happening in the goals and see how this could relate to the area where you are working on, and how we can make a bigger impact. Because as we have seen, KDE, I think we underestimate how much the impact is we can have with KDE. People know KDE. And I mean, we can get into the press, we can get invited to conferences, we can do things which really make a difference. So I think we should do that and use the strength of KDE as the one community we are. Yeah, the sustainable software goal. So officially, we are now wrapping up, but the goal work is not finished yet, of course. There's still more to do. So the goal lives on. Please get involved if you're interested in that. We have a mailing list. We have the community website where you can find all the information. We have a GitLab group where all the projects are there. So there are lots of things which still need to be done. So please get involved and help with sustainable software in the future as well. And during Academy, there will be two BOFs I want to point out about specific topics I mentioned before. So one about KDE Goals and one about the UpGreen project. I think there also will be a presentation about the UpGreen project later. So these BOFs, attend them. That's a great way to group. Okay, so the times are the other way around. The UpGreen BOF is at 10 and the other one at 15. So check the wiki to be sure you get to the right room at the right time. So we don't want the planet to burn. We still want to have a good living here. So we have to do something. We can do something as KDE. I think we are in a position to actually change things. And we are doing that. And let's do it together.
Doing Q&A now? Yep. Cool. Coming up.
All right. Now we have some time for questions for all of our gold champions. Yeah. Does anyone have questions?
Test. Not a question, but in the context of the accessibility goal, I would also like to thank NLnet for sponsoring some of the accessibility work in Plasma Wayland. That's it.
So I have two questions. The first one is about automation. I would like to ask about the switch from Fabricator to GitLab. So, actually, I would prefer Fabricator than GitLab because Fabricator actually pressures you to write small changes and it will get reviewed more quickly. But in GitLab, the merge request might get larger and larger, and it's harder and harder to review, and it will get stale. So, what do you think about this?
Does this work? Yes, sounds like it works. Thank you very much for the question. When it comes to Fabricator and anything. Apparently. It turns out I'm a Terminator.
So this is the mic.
Like that? Does that work? Okay. I know how to use technology. No, I don't. Okay, this thing goes over here. Okay. Anyway, the decision was kind of made for us because Fabricator was abandoned upstream. Maybe it's the other one. Testing? No. Switch is turned on. It says mic. Is this better now? Okay, this is better now. Anyway, sorry about that. So I was going to say, to a certain extent, the decision was made for us because Fabricator was abandoned upstream, essentially, and we wanted to move to something that was maintained. I'll say that personally, there were some aspects of Fabricator that I did prefer. Some of the things that you're talking about, I also preferred Fabricator's very flexible task tracking system that was quite freeform. Tasks didn't have to belong to a particular project. But one thing that's really nice about GitLab is that it's very extensible. So we've been able to do a little bit of what you were talking about in the form of merge request templates, for example, that encourage people to write a test plan and split their changes up into smaller pieces. This is something that isn't universal. It doesn't come for free, but we are all free as project maintainers to adopt it in our own projects. And several KDE projects have now adopted this. I'm always in favor of more projects doing it. So I think even if there are aspects of GitLab that are imperfect, we can extend it over time to make it better, which is a good thing. I think there was a follow-up question.
Okay. So a continuation of this. First of all, although Fabricator is abandoned, there is an active fork called Forge, and I personally am using it, and I like it pretty much. And another thing that Fabricator allows you to do is the stacked diffs. Like if you have one change that depends on another change that is pending review, it will make your life much easier than GitLab. And actually, I'm using both Fabricator and GitLab, and I have a way to make the Fabricator use GitLab CI/CD. Like if you want to do something like that, you're free to like talk to me about this.
Yeah, thank you. Those sound like some interesting improvements there. Without getting too much into the technical weeds here, I might recommend that you reach out to the sysadmin team. They're the ones who maintain our infrastructure, and it might be that some of the technological improvements you've discovered or invented have even could be broadly useful to KDE. So I think that would be a good resource for you to reach out to.
Hey, check. Yeah. Hey, so there's a project called. Yeah.
This microphone has some.
There's a project called OpenQA that. Check. Okay. Does it work? Okay. So there's a project called OpenQA that helps with testing the operating system as a whole. It's used in OpenSUSE and Fedora. And I think it would be great if we could, in some form, get it into KDE infrastructure. Because like some, so I've never used Selenium, so I don't know exactly how much you can test with Selenium, but there are some things that like require the full operating system to test. And so that would be a good candidate to help us write tests that involve the full cycle of the system. So yeah, it's not a question, sorry, but it's a suggestion.
Testing. Okay. So this is it's Cornelius directly addressed the issue of trying to engage the community, the larger community, and it kind of came up in Carl's presentation as well, and it's kind of related to the automation and systematization. I'm just going to yell it out.
No.
I just wanted to ask if
So the question was, what can we actually do to unite the goals to get the activities more broad to involve the whole community? So I already touched that a little bit. I think for me, one thing which is missing is this kind of central place where the community can meet, not only at the conference, but also online. We don't really have that in any way. So where things can be presented, where people meet, where you can read about what KDE is doing as a whole. That would be one thing I think could help with that. But what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think at last Academy, Joseph, you gave a presentation about our communications channels and how we often have it's all like a system of highways that go in all different directions. I think in KDE, we're very good at categorizing and subdividing and putting things into buckets. And I think we're often a little bit less good at broadening and seeing the connections between disparate things. So I would share the idea that if we have a place to come together, venues largely online, because that's how we work, where everybody can talk together and we aren't limited in scope to a narrow subject. I think that could help us to see the connections between things.
Yeah, to extend a bit to what Ova said, I think like as well like a bit more public communication and for as well like what we saw with the accessibility goals is that I wrote like maybe like 2-3 blog posts in the 2 years, and that might be not enough. There need to be like regular communication to the community to what the community see what's going on, and might helps the involvement. Yeah.
Thing that we are all of KDE is eco-friendly. So my main question is, how far along are we to get this everywhere? And is it even possible to do this automatically for applications instead of having people go to eco labs and make more manual testing?
Yeah, so the question how we can get more of this automated testing and where are we? I mean, with getting this overview, you saw where we are. We have a piece of paper with a sketch. Regarding integration with the CI, the current measurement process of the Blue Angel has the problem that it basically prescribes a physical setup where you need to put a measurement device in front of a computer. So you need really this physical thing in one specific way. It is remotely accessible already. If it's good enough to be integrated in a CI where it has to work reliably and not break the CI for no reason, that is something we have to see and have to try out. From my point of view, it's a matter of iterating, and I don't think we should enable it for all of KDE as a whole thing and see what breaks, but really make it useful for maybe for Ocular as the first application where we already have all the setup done. We need to write usage scenarios for other applications. We also have some of them, but then we could gradually enable it step by step by having one application after the other enabled with that, and see how much of automation actually also makes sense, because we have to balance the effort we put into the automation to the value of the results of that. Sometimes it's not very easy to measure the energy efficiency of an application, and might just be overhead we introduce, because that's another aspect. CI also needs energy. So we have to see how we can be smart about not introducing more energy consumption and trying to be more energy efficient.
I have something to add to that briefly. I think that was a very important point. This also gets to the previous question, which is how can we make the goals more visible? I think anything that we can do to kind of push information in front of people who don't see it, that helps. So in this case, for example, if we have eco stuff in the CI, developers who aren't accustomed to thinking about that all of a sudden have exposure to it because they push a change, the eco CI turns red, and then they'll say, oh, wow, this change regressed the energy efficiency of the software in a way I didn't even expect. And that's a way to gain experience and familiarity with the topic that you might not have, it might have been invisible to you before.
Hello. Okay, so the question about the KDE Eco, you are saying that we were not able to reach out to more people. So I think two questions regarding that. Have we tried reaching out to some of our open source community friends, like for example, Genome or as such, and have we tried including them also in the same goal kind of thing? And second question is like one thing or one general idea I see like with the KDE Eco project is like it is limited to a lot of what is being done in the Europe rather than having it part of the like global community. So are there any already like plans or discussions happening in terms of like extending it outside of the Europe?
So this is the key question, right? How we get more of the KDE community involved and more of the global free software community involved. We actually had quite some conversations with other projects about the Blue Angel certification. That was one hook which worked. For example, we had a number of discussions with the Document Foundation where they said, okay, we are really interested in that, but we can't do it. So we first had to show them that it's possible to do it. I think we also approached the Blue Angel there with a little bit of a hacker spirit, not following the letters of the word, but following the spirit, and this worked out quite well. So explaining that to others, where you can maybe compromise on some things and still get forward, that helps quite a bit. So I think there's still a lot more to do, I would say. So what we have with the free software, the Blue Angel for Free Software project, what we saw is the fact that still Oculus, the only application, shows that the adoption of the label itself in the industry was not as they would have hoped for. So there's still, of course, a lot more to do. At the moment, I think our focus is more on users with the next project, so less about the community, friends, and family. So this would be something where, you all could help with your individual projects, with the specific groups you are in, and also if there is, opportunities where we can bring this in, we are not taking at the moment. So I don't know, conferences, free software conferences where we are not presenting the stuff yet or not getting into conversations with others. We should use that. I think at the moment it's not really on the top priority of the agenda of the eco community. So outside input would actually help a lot there.
Short question.
I have a question about the energy measurement. Does it work in any hardware and produce the same results? Or, for example, if we run it on AMD or Intel, it produces different numbers. So can we have the same numbers running the test locally compared to the KDE infrastructure?
Yeah, so the system at the moment is focused on the procedure which is prescribed by the Blue Angel, which specifies a specific computer you have to run it on. And it's not meant for comparison, but more to get some impression about the consumption and that you can compare over time how it changes and so on. So this is not very much in focus, these comparisons and so on. But I think with the current systems, it's possible to implement that and do that. And I personally would think it would be quite helpful to look more into not only do the measurement as a means to get the criteria fulfilled, because that's kind of a formal thing, but more really to get an understanding, compare different hardware platforms, different software frameworks, whatever, to get an impression what actually has an impact on the actual energy consumption. So, but again, that is something where I think there's still a lot to do.
Thank you so much to you and everyone else who helped with the goals we just wrapped up. And in 5 minutes, we will start revealing the new ones.